Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jerry Petito Show on Damon Looks, part two. Okay, we just did part one, and then we had tech issues, and I apologize. So this is part two of the story behind the Voice of Hope with Andrea Kuczynski. Where we left off was she told her story on part one of her illnesses and her surgeries and everything that brought her to of Voice of Hope. And we ended off, Andrea, with you talking about your plan and what you said to God versus God's plan for the Voice of Hope.
Okay. Well, what happened is I had a plan that, I was just not going to have any of these surgeries. I was just going to move forward, and I was going to be healed and everything. And that didn't happen. And but God had a different plan.
Okay.
And through going through all these things I've went through, all these 10 years, God led me to the place I am today, 2 years ago. But how that come about is I met a friend called Krista Joy, which you know, Jerry. And after we became friends for probably about 6 months or so, she asked me to be her assistant. And so I started helping with some event coordinating, and I never really did much stuff like that for quite some time, for like over 10 years with all the things going on.
Okay.
And through probably that year, I finally got the nerve to tell Krista one day as we were driving home from a project I was helping her with. And I said, I have this dream, and I've always had this dream. I want to spread hope. Do you think that's really possible, that maybe I could do that on some kind of platform? She said, yeah, sure you could. And so it all started. That was the first day I ever really had told anybody about that. And so I actually, back in 2006, I always pray for divine connections. So when Krista came on my show about a year ago, I think, I shared this, and I actually had a vision board for myself that I wrote back in 2005.
Okay.
When I was sitting in that church in Orlando, Florida, and listening to Pastor Clint Brown tell that story about the pearl. I went home and I wrote this vision, and I said, this is my vision. And I wrote August 2005. Someday, I want to create a dream center to help others recapture their dream, and so that they can find their purpose, and they can start to follow their dreams, their God-given callings that God has called them to do. And I kept, saying, I will focus. I will see this dream come to pass. Every day I put that in my devotional, and every morning I would read that vision that I wrote down 15 years ago, and I would tell myself that one day that's going to come to pass. And even my grandson that lives with me, he helped me draw out this little cafe. Because I said, someday we're going to be in this cafe. We're going to have it, and it's going to be called this, and, something to do with divine, because I always prayed for divine connections. And I said, it's got to be some kind of place where people can tell their stories, and they can listen to music, and they can let hope hit their soul again, and they can recapture their dreams. So, he would help me with that. Sometimes we would sit down and brainstorm. Well, when I met Krista and I started watching her do a podcast that she did, she's like, why don't you try to do a podcast? And I was like, I don't know. That was like probably 3 years ago. And one day she was talking to me, and this is when I say we never meet no one by accident.
You ain't kidding.
She says, my maiden name on my mom's side of the family was Divine. I said, what did you just say? And she said, divine. I said, you mean like divine perfection? She's like, yeah. I was like, oh my goodness. She didn't just say that, because I always pray for divine connections.
Okay.
And so I started to share more of my dream with her, and she introduced me to a lady named Marielle Morales. And Marielle, she had a program called the Life Artist Program, and it's to help people recapture their dream. And she said, "Will you be my first student?" I said, "Yeah, sure. I'll do it." So I worked with her for a few months, and then the summer came of 2018, and I had other friends that was encouraging me. I had a friend that passed away during that year, February of that year, and I would always take her to all the shows. Her name's Sue Minusek. You've probably heard me talk of her, Jerry.
Yep.
And she looked at me one day at her last show, and I would pick her up, and she says, "Have you accepted the invitation to speak at that women's group that you go to?" And I said, "No, Sue, I haven't. It's not time for me to do that." And she said, "Can you tell me the real story about Andrea?" And I said, "I'm a grandmother, I'm a mother, and all that." She said, "No, the real story."
Okay.
And so one day when I was talking to her on the phone, I told her some of the things I've went through and everything, and she got totally silent. And I said, "See, that's why I didn't want to tell you my real story." And she said, "No, that's what you're supposed to be doing." She said, "If it's the last thing I do, I want to see you telling your story like that. That's what you're meant to be doing." Well, she passed away February 2018. And that summer, June of 2018, I finally got the courage after Krista, Marielle, and a lot of my friends along the way had encouraged me. "You always, post all this encouraging stuff. You're always there for others. Why don't you try to make this on a social media platform?" So I said, "Okay, I'll start with the Voice of Hope podcast." So that's where the Voice of Hope originally started. And I started to do these podcasts. And in August of 2018, Marielle invited me to come on her show. And that was the very first time I ever told one part of my story, which is about my chronic illness. And after that, I started the Voice of Hope Facebook page in September of 2018. And then I had an outpouring of people with my condition wanting to be interviewed because that's the month for the awareness of carrier malformation. So I continued to do my interviews on my podcast. I continued to do my interviews on the Voice of Hope Facebook page. And then last year, I was asked to be on a internet radio station by Brother O. Me and Jerry is both on the same radio station. And so I'm now doing the Voice of Hope on radio. And to tell you all of this, Brother O, our producer, I don't know if I've ever told him this or not, but when he made me the promotional video, he makes a promotional video for each one of us.
Yes.
I cried because when I seen it, he had Amazing Grace playing in the background of the promotional video.
It's beautiful.
And the beginning of the video, if any of you have seen it, there's a hand and there's a small hand, and he said, "That's you and your grandson." He didn't know that near-death experience I had 14 years ago.
Wow.
He didn't know none of that. And I don't even know if I've told him. If he hears this now, he'll know. But when I seen that video, it was just God confirming that all the years of all the things that I went through, all my near-death experiences and all the things, he was using those, even though he did not heal me like my plan was. And it says Proverbs 3:5 that trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not into your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge him and he'll direct your path.
Right.
And he directed my path the whole way. And it wasn't my life didn't turn out like I wanted it to be. But if I had never have went through all the stuff I've went through, I would say probably over the 30-year span of my life, I don't think I would have been able to see people the way I see them. And I've had so many people on the show, not with just chronic illnesses, but with abuse, drug addiction, that's lost the death of children, so many different things, so many people from different walks of life. And I see now that God was using me to create this platform so that I could let others come on there and share their story, because your story, I didn't realize how powerful our stories are. It's part of your healing. And the reason hope, I came up with the name Voice of Hope. Well, that was given to me, I feel, by God. And in the middle of the night before I started the Voice of Hope podcast, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this, God. And I went live in a group of about 6,000 women. It's a private group. And I had never went live nowhere on social media anywhere. And so I went live for about 15 minutes and told them I was going to do this. And but I still didn't know what I was going to call the show. I had no clue. So I remember going to bed that night and I kept hearing the voice of hope. So I write lots of poetry. And when I got up, I just wrote it down. So I thought when I wrote that down, it would, get out of my head. So when I got up and I wrote it down, and I have a book that says it's never too late to be what you might have been. And when I wrote it down in that book, it's like, oh gosh, I get it. I get it, God. The voice of hope. That's what you want me to call it. So I wrote a poem called The Voice of Hope that night. And I feel it was God showing me that we all are voices of hope. He is the almighty voice of hope.
But Andrea, wait, I have a question for you. Well, I want to give a shout out to someone. You have a very good friend in the chat room here on YouTube, Angie. She says hello. So she's in there listening to the show.
Tell her I said hi and I love her. And tell her, Angie, I'm wearing my Wonder Woman shirt for you today, girl. She knows what that means.
So, Andrea, do you have that poem available to read?
I do.
Would you like to read it for us?
Yeah, sure.
I would love that.
So I sat down that night, and this is what happened. I had been, because I don't always write a poem in one setting. Sometimes it takes me up to 6 months to write a poem. Sometimes it might take a day and I can write a whole poem. Okay. But God had been working on this poem for a long time, because I had little taglines, as I call them. They was written in this book, all over this book. And when I wrote it on one page and I put all of those sentences together, here's what the poem came to be. Okay. The Voice of Hope. Okay. Reach the nation with inspiration. Stop hate and learn to relate. Learn to feel free to be who you are meant to be. With a beautiful soul, you'll reach your goal. What you believe, you can achieve. When loving hearts collide, that's where dreams thrive. You are beautiful being an individual. You are unique. That's what makes you complete. Spread love and learn not to judge. Spread hope and always end on a positive note. You will see only if you believe. That's the voice of hope.
It's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. So, I need a copy of that. I'll put it next to our page.
Okay.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I want to ask you a couple questions, but mainly, you said how, you gave God, you told God what you thought you should have or what you wanted to do and then God showed you, of course, right?
Yes.
The thing that people need to understand out there is it's not just, God doesn't do that just for certain people. He does that for all of us if we're willing to listen. You know, we have to go to God. He's there waiting for us. So it's not like any of us are any different than you or better than you in God's eyes. Trust me, that's not the case. You know, we want to stress, Andrea and I, you know, we do certain shows together and we always stress the importance of your relationship with God. So he's there waiting with open arms, right, Andrea?
Yes, always.
Talk about that a
Always.
little bit. Talk about that so people get it.
You know, I don't think I could have got through, I say 1 second without God. You know, some people say 1 day at a
Me
time.
too.
I couldn't get through a day without God. I had to depend on him every second, because there's times that, you know, I couldn't walk good. I couldn't eat good. I couldn't even brush my own hair. I was paralyzed for a period of time. I couldn't use my arms really well. And I was really hopeless. And I didn't see a future. I didn't see me doing anything like this. But through every moment when I would have a really, really bad storm, God would always use something, whether it was a song, whether it was a friend calling me to encourage me that day or pray for me. And they didn't know what I was going through, but God did. And when you're out there and you're going through a hard time and you feel all alone and you feel like you're the only one going through this and you feel like God doesn't hear you, I promise you, he does. He bottles up your tears in bottles, and he hears everything you're saying, every prayer, and they may not feel like they're being heard because they're not being answered like right away. And we live in an instantaneously society where
You're right about that.
we're so used to getting everything instantly.
Right about that.
But with this virus going on, I think it's made a lot of people stop and reflect, like I had to reflect for all those years. And I hope that if you're out there and you think that your life is over, you think that what you're going through can never change, I want to let my story inspire you and let hope hit your soul today. Because when it hits your soul, there's a calling God has for you to do that only you can do. He made every one of us with a different fingerprint. That's how unique you are. And only you can do the calling that he's called you to do. And my logo, that was created by my friend Amy Barbaria. And the reason I have a red rose on there and a purple rose, the purple rose, of course, is to symbolize the color of Chiari Malformation, the awareness color. But the red rose, I studied the red rose and I told her I'd like to have it on my logo because the rose, it's planted, and we don't know what it's going to turn out to be like. We don't know if it's going to be big and beautiful. We don't know what shade of red it's going to turn out to be like. And it has lots of different petals. And I chose the color red on my logo because that color of red means unconscious beauty and unseen treasures. And I feel that's what we all are. We're all like those petals on that rose. We each have walked in different journeys in our life. And when we come together, we share our stories, our journeys, and we all start to share our journeys together. It makes this beautiful display of beauty. And the world is inspired, by all of our stories. And that's why I use the rose, because I feel each one of us, once we're connected to what God has called us to be, and then we come together, it can just be this amazing thing. Just like you and I connecting, Jerry.
Right.
And, being on the radio together, and you inspire me to do certain things sometimes. And I hope I inspire you in some way.
Oh, come
And
on. You absolutely inspire me. Listen, you calm me down.
so that's why I think God, I felt God used the rose for me, because every story is important and God's carrying us and He wants us all to come together and, you know, come out of that darkness that we're in. And I call it the rabbit hole. If you feel like you're deep, deep down in that dark pit, call out, reach out to a friend and, ask for prayer, or just, you might just need someone to listen to you that day. And, call someone, call me, the voice of hope, Jerry, we're here, or someone maybe you hadn't talked to in a while, and call on God. Ask Him to send you a friend, because I promise you, I was in the hospital one time when I did not know what was wrong with me. And a woman this is how God will answer prayers. You don't think He's listening. I was walking in a neck brace down the halls, stressed out because I still didn't know what was wrong. And I walked beside this woman's room probably 5 or 6 times. I don't know how many times. And it was like I heard this voice say, introduce yourself. And I was like, no, God, I'm not going to do that. This lady's going to think I'm like a nutcase or something. And so I said, okay, I'm going to do it. I got the nerve, and I walked to her door, and I looked there and I said, hi, my name's Andrea Kuczynski, and I'm in the room beside you. And she starts crying. And I said, oh my gosh, I'm thinking in my mind, see, God, yep, she thinks I'm a nutcase. And so I asked, no, it's not you. She goes, I was just sitting here and I just was praying for God to send me a friend. And you just walked in the doorway and introduced yourself. And I was like, oh, wow. And, we were friends for like a year. She passed away a year afterwards, but God answered one of her last prayers is to have a friend, because she had no family here in Florida. She had 4 young children. And, God hears you when you think in those dark moments. He hears you.
He does. He does. And, I have to say this because everybody thinks those little voices inside your head are just coincidences. No, they're not. Okay,
no.
Listen to those voices as long as they're positive voices. That's what I want to stress. As long as there's something good, something positive, listen to those voices. It's usually from God.
Yes, it is. Most definitely.
Andrea, let's give a shout out to your friend Angie from the Journey to Wellness with Angie. I don't want to say her last name wrong, but it's Walsh, but the middle last name. Give a shout out and tell everyone about her.
Well, Angie Sedeth Walsh is a wonderful lady. She's a wonderful friend of mine. And Angie's been on my show a couple times. And I know she probably don't mind me saying this. She struggled with Lyme disease, and she is a warrior, I'm telling you. And she has inspired me on more days than I can imagine.
She's given you a lot of smiles, girlfriend. Aw.
I have to say this. I'll never forget. It was last year in March, and I know Angie remembers this. It was on International Women's Day, and Angie she lives here in Florida too, and she has a show called The Journey of Wellness, and she's helped so many people. And she's been through a lot herself, and she's so inspirational, and to more people than she probably can even imagine. And she wanted to be, I was going to interview her on The Voice of Hope, and we had been talking on the phone, and she said, you want to do it in person? And I said, yeah. And so she drove to my house, and I knew all she had been through, and she had had a near-death experience too, and she'd come a long way. And when I seen her that day, when I opened up my door it was like, I just can't, it was like a miracle standing before me. And she gave me, it's like so much more hope than I could ever have asked for, because I knew what she went through, but seeing her, and I knew she had to drive a distance to my house, and she was driving again. She had been through all this stuff, and she had drove that distance to my house, and she looked so pretty. I remember her dress she had on, and I had on my Wonder Woman shirt like I do today. And
Andrea, wait, she's sending you hearts and smiles, and I love you, girl, but she's sending tears. Stop making her cry.
Well, it's like, she's one of those people.
Aww.
She's like an angel to me that God sent along the way to say, hey, Andrea, you can do this, girl. You can do this. Wow. I did it. Yeah. And I'm just so grateful. She's one of those divine connections that God placed in my life, and just a wonderful lady. If you want to hear her story, you can go to the Voice of Hope and go on last year, and she's been on a couple times, and I hope to have her back on again soon. She's just such an inspiration to me. And thank you, Angie, for joining today. I love you, girl.
She's saying you're the true voice of hope, and she said God sent you to her as well. Angie, if you want an interview with me, I'd love to do it, sweetie. We could set that up. Just reach out to me on Facebook. Absolutely. Andrew, we're coming to the close of the show, but you have a few minutes. Tell everyone anything else you'd like to tell them, also how to get in touch with you.
If you want to get in touch with me, you can go to the Voice of Hope Facebook page, and I post all my podcast. I post all my live Facebook shows there. I'll be having one tonight in 1 hour at 7 p.m. And then I'm on Beverly Nations internet radio station every other Wednesday night. My next show is next Wednesday night, May the 20th at 9 p.m.
Beautiful. Is there anything else you'd like to say out there to everyone before we close?
No, I think that's about it. Just don't never give up hope, and just always keep the faith, and never lose sight of your dream and your vision that God gave you, because if it takes years, it's taken years for a reason, and it's always in His timing. And when it's His time, it'll come to pass.
You know, I want to say something about what you just said, that it's in His timing. You know, and here's, you know, the sarcastic Italian in me. All right. So, you know, I grew up, of course, in this super sarcastic family. You know, we're all Italians and crazy people. But, you know, we all think we're famous. You know, we all want to say, like my brother to this day, he thinks he's the Don. Okay. So, you know, so we all think we're famous in our own right, you know, but I have to say something. It took me to be in my 50s, and I really do feel like I have a little bit of that now. So when I wrote my book, guys, this is crazy. I'm not an addict. I'm just an ass. I'd rather be a smart ass than a dumb ass. I wrote this book because God told me to write my book and my story about addiction. And this whole book is filled with God, because if it wasn't for God, I wouldn't be here. So when the book was written 4.5 years ago, 5 years ago, it's being revised this month, actually. It'll be done this week. You know, who would have thought what was going to take place after that, right? I got asked on Hamilton Radio to do an interview about my book. The next thing you know, they're asking me to be a host. The next thing you know, 5 other networks come across, and they're like, we want you. Next thing you know, I'm in the Internet International Hall of Fame for radio show host, right, Andrea?
Yeah.
Now, imagine that, a drug addict here. Imagine that, okay? It took God till I was in my 50s to say, okay, now we're really going to get your story out there. That was His plan, right? You know, I joke around a lot, and I say, because I had that T-shirt with the little kid, and I put my head on it, and it says, it doesn't matter where you move my seat, teacher. I talk to everybody anyway, right? I talk to everybody anyway. You know, you can move my seat, but it's not going to stop me from talking. But so I would say I should have done this a long time ago, but God said, no, 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 it wasn't time. So he knew exactly when it was time for me to do this. You know,
That's right.
29 years ago, I changed my entire life, guys. I gave it to God. And here I am today. So when you think that you are in the depths of drowning in your life, I'm here to tell you there's hope. Okay? I'm here to tell you that because I'm proof of it. Okay?
That's right. That's right.
Andrea is proof of it. Okay, this beautiful lady, Angie, listening in, right? Her journey to wellness with Angie. She's proof of it. Okay.
Yes.
And there's so many more people out there that have proof of it. So, you know what, Andrea? I think I'm going to do this. I'm going to end this show with my poem in my book called Change Your Choice. Okay. Because, well, wait, you know what I think I should read for? I'm going to read two poems. I think I want to read, hold on. Let's read Faith. How about that? Let's read Faith, okay? That's the one we'll close the show with. It's a short poem, but I think it's appropriate. So, guys, I want to thank everybody out there for listening. Please share this video. Andrea, of course, I want to thank you. You know, it's always a pleasure being interviewed by you or interviewing you. You know,
you're welcome.
Our interviews always touch so many lives. I love you and thank you for that. Guys,
I love you.
Please share this video because this video needs to be out there to save lives today. So I'm going to close today with my poem called Faith. Put your faith in something greater. Do it now. Don't wait till later. Lord, my God, please keep me sane. I need a switch to shut off my brain. When I feel shattered, broken and torn, when I ache and cry, I'm tired and worn, you lift me up and wipe my tears. You whisper gently to have no fears. For my free will has lost control. To get it back will be my goal. I need to just have faith in you. There's nothing more that I can do. Have a really great day, everyone. Thank you.
I love that.